Deep Purple, were formed in 1968, and played their first official gig in Denmark in March of that year. Chris Curtis, who was the Searchers' drummer from 1963 to 1966, played a major role in the formation of Deep Purple. Curtis left the Searchers in mid-1966 after an extensive Australian tour with the Rolling Stones. Curtis had the idea to form a group called Roundabout. His vision was a supergroup. Curtis contacted London businessman Tony Edwards, who agreed to manage and finance this new band that he was putting together. The first recruit to the band was classically trained organ player John Lord. Nick Simper had previously played with artists such as Buddy Britton. John Lord and Nick Simper left the tour with the Flowerpot Men and flew back to London, where they met Ritchie Blackmore. By 1965, Blackmore had already become one of the most in-demand session guitarists in Britain. The guitarist got his start in music as a member of Screaming Lord Sutch and the Savages.
So Joe Meek heard about this and said, "Oh, how about joining my band, the Outlaws?" So I said, "Okay, sounds good to me." I mean, the Outlaws were more well-known than the Savages, so I was quite pleased.
As a member of the Outlaws, Blackmore played on multiple sessions by producer Joe Meek, and the group also recorded several singles, which features a guitar solo that was way ahead of its time.
Joe Meek had said to me, "Go crazy, play a very weird solo, bend the notes, and play with lots of distortion and a very freaky effect." And I went, okay. I was quite proud of that solo at its time, which was 63. And when I met Jeff Beck in 67 in the Ship in Water Street, he told me how much Hendrix had liked that particular track. So I was very pleased with that, as I was a Hendrix fanatic and a Jeff Beck fanatic.
Some of his best work as a session guitarist can be found on recordings by Hines, one of Joe Meek's protégés. Just like that B-side by the Outlaws, Blackmore's solos sounded way ahead of their time. Blackmore met John Lord and Nick Simper in London, and they quickly started looking for a drummer. Blackmore was a big fan of Bobby Clark, and he managed to convince him to join the band. Bobby Clark had been the legendary drummer for Vince Taylor and the Playboys. In the early to mid-60s, Bobby Clark was regarded as one of the greatest drummers in Britain, and he was one of the first rock drummers to adopt the double bass drum setup, which of course became de rigueur for many hard rock drummers. Just like Blackmore's guitar playing, Bobby Clark's drumming style was also quite ahead of its time.
But what really made it was the fact that he said, "I've got an idea for the Beatles' Help," he said, "but not the way they do it." He said, "I've got an idea for doing it like a ballad." And he sat down and started doing the Beatles' Help, the way we recorded it on the first album, and it just blew us all away, you know. And I thought, this guy, he's got ideas, he can do something different. And that was it, he got the job.
Rod Evans got his start in music as the lead singer of a band called the MI5, a group which also featured a 16-year-old drummer called Ian Pate. Ritchie Blackmore had seen the Maze in Hamburg in 1967, and he remembered that he had been quite impressed with Ian Pate. He saw Bobby's departure. Bobby shook my hand as he left, and we resolved to stay in touch. Roundabout were now fully formed, and the group was finally ready to tour. During a brief tour of Denmark and Sweden in April 1968, in which they were still billed as Roundabout, Blackmore suggested they should change the name to Deep Purple, after his grandmother's favorite song.
When the deep purple